This map was drawn by Robert Louis Stevenson to illustrate his famous book Treasure Island. And this island, called Fidra Island, or just Fidra, is thought to have been the inspiration for that book. Concerning Fidra, Stevenson wrote, "A strange grey islet of two humps, and I mind that the sea peeped through like a man's eye." Fidra is 20 miles east of Edinburgh in the Firth of Forth. The Stevenson family lived in Edinburgh, and for summer holidays they usually went to North Berwick, near Fidra, by train, the first train journeys that young Stevenson had ever made. While staying in North Berwick, Louis, as the boy was called by his family, would have walked or ridden a pony along these sandy beaches. One link with North Berwick are the houses rented by the Stevenson family for their holidays, one of which was number 7 in the curved road called the Quadrant. The view from the Quadrant looks straight out across the Firth of Forth, and round the corner is the Bass Rock, another of North Berwick's famous islands. Stevenson writes about the Bass Rock in his letters and books. In his book Katrina, Stevenson makes David Balfour to be imprisoned on the Bass Rock, the lighthouse, which was not built in Stevenson's boyhood, being where the prison used to be. He describes the Bass Rock as tilted seawards like a doubtful bather, the solan geese hanging around its summit like a great and glittering smoke. The rock is still famous today, 120 years later, though what Stevenson called solan geese are now called gannets. Stevenson also writes about the foot of the North Berwick Law, the Law being the little mountain behind the town. In his book Katrina, Stevenson mentions the 3 great towers and broken battlements of Tantallon, a castle which lies 2 miles east of North Berwick. Because of all these links between North Berwick and Robert Louis Stevenson, the town decided to hold a festival in June 2006 to celebrate their connection with him. A badge was designed for the festival with the words that Stevenson penned many years later, "Home is the sailor, home from sea." Signboards advertising the festival were erected on main roads leading into the town. Banners with quotes from Stevenson's writings were hung in different parts of the town. This one reads, "Hail guest, and enter freely. All you see is, for your momentary visit, yours, and we who welcome you are but the guests of God, and know not our departure." The local council cooperated by making one of its flower beds in the same pattern as the festival badge. Many of the activities of the festival were held in the Scottish Seabird Centre. The first item was an exhibition of memorabilia of Stevenson. Preparations for this were done early on the opening day.
Hello, I'm June Douglas Hamilton. I organised this exhibition and I'd like to show you around some of the exhibits. In this glass case we have a very early edition of the book Kidnapped. The heroes are Alan Breck and David Balfour. Above the book is a very good early illustration of Alan Breck. It's from a similar illustration that Sandy Stoddart, one of our great sculptors, was commissioned by Scottish and Newcastle to do a Robert Louis Stevenson monument, and he chose the figures of Alan Breck and David Balfour for his wonderful bronze, which is out at Corstorphine in Edinburgh. This is the original plaster cast head of the statue which is out at Corstorphine, the bronze statue, and very kindly loaned to us by Sandy Stoddart from his own collection. This red ensign was originally on the boat Casco, which belonged to Stevenson in Samoa. When he died, flag was taken off its boat and placed over his coffin. Under the wide and starry sky, dig the grave and let me lie. Glad did I live and gladly die, and I laid me down with a will. This be the verse you grave for me. Here he lies where he longed to be. Home is the sailor, home from sea, and the hunter home from the hill. This is a picture of Louis Stevenson with his mother and cousin Bessie. He is 13, and the photograph is taken in Germany. This photograph is of Thomas Stevenson, engineer, with his son Robert Louis Stevenson, aged 15. Thomas Stevenson did repairs to the harbour in 1865. There this photograph was taken, the harbour in North Berwick, and later did the lighthouse on Fidra. This would be the 5th year that the family had been coming to North Berwick for the summer holidays.
Pat Coxhead, the overall organiser, explains the aims of the festival.
We want to involve the North Berwick community in this event celebrating Robert Louis Stevenson. We've invited shops to participate in the displays. We have organised art workshops and writing workshops for both adults and children. We're inviting the children in the schools to participate in all sorts of different ways in learning about Robert Louis Stevenson and in reciting poetry, etc. And then in the evenings we have a variety of different events all about the great man Robert Louis Stevenson.
At the opening ceremony, Sir Hugh Dalrymple, a previous Lord Lieutenant of East Lothian, and whose family has been the legal owners of the Bass Rock for several centuries, was the main speaker.
Festival and to open this exhibition. The weather has not helped us, but Robert Louis Stevenson would fully understand the hard side, and he wouldn't mind a bit, I'm sure.
One of the town shops which cooperated in the Stevenson Festival was the Crystal Engraver, whose engraved glasses have been given as presents to the guest speakers and singers.
My name is Brian Green. I am the Crystal Engraver in North Berwick. I was asked by the Robert Louis Stevenson Steering Committee to produce glasses for them. This is the glass that I designed for them. It has their logo on one side, and on the other side my own display of the island of Fidra.
One afternoon, North Berwick primary school children met in the festival tent to reenact scenes from Stevenson's books, particularly Treasure Island and Kidnapped. And they also performed scenes from his life, like when he bought a schooner and sailed to Samoa. These are some of the paintings done by the local primary school children displayed in a local gallery. The Seabird Centre has its own cafe with a view of the sea, and one evening there was a storytelling supper held in that cafe.
And so I want to take us to two of his great, great loves. And one, of course, was the love of Scotland. And he says here, the happiest lot on earth is to be born a Scotsman. But you must pay for it in many ways. You have to learn the paraphrases and the shorter catechism you generally take to drink. I'm not going to look at anybody.
There was a special cake that evening, shaped like a book. On the Fidra page, there was one of Stevenson's poems for children. when I was down beside the sea, a wooden spade they gave to me to dig the sandy shore. One day there was a showing of films based on Stevenson's stories. One of these films being, of course, Treasure Island. Another evening there was a dinner for the great and the good of North Berwick. This is Archie Leslie, great-grandson of Charles Stevenson, who was a cousin of Robert Louis Stevenson, and though 5 years older, they were playmates and companions at family holidays in North Berwick. Archie had flown over from the United States to be present at this dinner and to show some photos of those times.
This is a picture of Fidra before the lighthouse was built. It's a very old photograph, I'm afraid, so the reproduction is not very good. Now, this is a little hard to see, but amongst other things that RLS did was to carve his initials in the rock along the beach here. Thanks to Chris Marr, this in May when I was over here, we went and found the spot in Canty Bay where RLS did indeed carve his initials. It's a little obscure there, so while we were there, Chris and I sort of just cleaned out the seaweed.
And this booklet, it's a lovely booklet, and it's been written by a lovely place North Berwick is.
Thank you so much.
At one of the evening concerts, there was a song about Stevenson's links with North Berwick, which sums up the spirit of the festival.
As a sickly lad outcast and sad, some sorrows there ye saw, and the sweetest hours you spent with him, the shade of North Berwick law, where your kith and kin you would love and bring, through sand and surf and sea, while the bass and Fidra spied your dreams, and inspired your innery. Oh Stevenson, though your body's far and gone, your thoughts and food in the sands of holy earth.
Well, we come to the end of what has proved to be a wonderful week in North Berwick. A week during which there have been any number of events and happenings, activities, for everyone, from the children to the grown-ups. And as the Robert Louis Stevenson Club, of which I'm secretary, we are absolutely delighted to have been able to support the event, because Stevenson is special all over the world. We have members all over the world, and all over the world there are people who love his writing, are fascinated by his life, but not many may have known so much about the young days spent here at the seaside with his parents and his cousins, and the effect that had on his life and on his writing. So it's proved to be a most enjoyable week. A lot of people have been brought together, become friends during that time, and I think if this event were to be repeated next year, or perhaps in the future, I think it would be just as great a success as it has proved in 2006.
Oh,